In tonight's news edition, 33 security officers who were injured in raids against terrorists in Karak are discharged from hospital. The last stage of evacuating rebels and civilians from Syrian city of Aleppo is underway. And the United Nations Security Council postpones a vote on a draft resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlements. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. 33 security officers who were injured in raids against terrorists in Karak were discharged from hospital. Director of the Royal Medical Services, Major General Ma'in al-Habashne, said the security personnel had left the Al Hussein Medical City after receiving treatment and recovering. He said they were in good condition and will soon join their units. He said a total of 29 policemen had been admitted to the medical center since Sunday, but 6 are still receiving treatment and are in good condition. Lawmakers today visited the officers injured in the security sweep, which public security and gendarmerie forces launched to arrest the gang that terrorized Karak and killed 14 people, most of them members of the security forces. MP Yahya al-Saud, who heads the lower house's Palestine committee, called on all Jordanians to stand behind their leadership and security forces to defeat the terrorists who sought to destabilize the country. Meanwhile, the Jordan news agency Petra posted footage of the joint security operation in Karak on Tuesday, where officers were ambushed by gunmen in their hideout. Security forces threw a cordon around the house of the village of Greyfilla. The last stage of evacuating rebels and civilians from the Syrian city of Aleppo was underway. Rebels' cars were seen leaving via Ramuse crossing south of the city. More than 4,000 fighters were evacuated last night from eastern Aleppo to opposition-held areas under an agreement between the warring sides that was overseen by the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. This brought to around 34,000 the total number of people evacuated from the district in a week-long operation that has been hampered by heavy snow and wind. A Red Cross official said the evacuation was expected to continue throughout the night and tomorrow. At the United Nations, the Security Council unanimously called for UN officials and others to observe the evacuation of people from Aleppo and monitor the safety of civilians who remain in the Syrian city. UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura said a cessation of hostilities across Syria is vital if another battle like the bloody fight for Aleppo is to be avoided.
The next steps, of course, is to look at where do the people who are being evacuated go and whether they, in the winter, will be actually not suffering further. Because some of them have went to West Aleppo, few. Many have gone to the rural part of Aleppo, which is in the armed controlled areas, in the armed opposition. And therefore, again, a question about how to make sure that the humanitarian aid from the UN can reach them. And many have gone to Idlib, which could be, in theory, the next Aleppo.
And then the second question is...
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said the regaining of full control of Aleppo is a victory for his Russian and Iranian allies as much as his own country. In comments after meeting a senior Iranian delegation, Assad also said the battlefield success was a basic step on the road to ending terrorism in the whole of Syrian territory and creating the right circumstances for a solution to end the war. Russia's Air Force conducted hundreds of raids against rebel-held parts of Aleppo, while Iranian-backed militias led by Lebanese Hezbollah militia poured thousands of fighters to fight rebels along the city's main front lines. Daesh claimed 3 suicide car bombs that killed at least 15 civilians and 8 Iraqi policemen in an eastern suburb of Mosul. The bombings occurred as the Iraqi army's rapid response unit battled the terror group in the Intisar neighborhood in southeast Mosul. The head of the unit said the troops were preparing for a large-scale operation very soon. The terrorists still hold 3/4 of Mosul, where around 1 million residents struggle with food and water shortage and the ongoing fighting. The U.S.-backed assault on Mosul was the biggest military operation in Iraq since the U.S.-led invasion. The offensive has triggered a refugee crisis with more than 200,000 people leaving the city. But displaced Iraqis were leaving what they called indescribable camps.
After spending months here at the Qazair refugee camp, dozens of displaced Iraqis have reached their limit. With frequent shortages and grim winter conditions, many are choosing to leave the camp. Some say they'll return home now that the army has recaptured some areas of Mosul back from Islamic State.
It is better to go back home than to stay here where it is cold and rainy. The tents fall over us. It's not like being home and warm. The heaters they gave us are of poor quality. They leak into the tent. Our areas were liberated and nothing is happening there, thank God.
The United Nations says nearly 91,000 people have been registered as displaced in Mosul, and the World Health Organization says some 70% of the newly displaced people are living in camps that these people say they can no longer bear.
It's true that it is safe here and we have food and water, but life here is horrible. It is indescribable.
The life that these Iraqis hope to leave behind for good.
Israeli occupation forces shot and killed a 19-year-old Palestinian during clashes that erupted in Qalandiya refugee camp north of Jerusalem. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Israeli troops raided homes in the camp and the nearby village of Kufr Aqab, triggering clashes and stone-throwing Palestinian youth. The raid was to demolish the home of a Palestinian who was killed in an attack in Jerusalem in October that killed an Israeli soldier and settler. The Palestinian killed by the Israeli army was identified as Ahmad al-Kharoubi. The United Nations Security Council voted on a draft resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlements has been postponed. Egypt circulated the draft yesterday evening and the 15-member council was due to vote today. But Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump urged Washington to veto the resolution. Netanyahu appealed to the Obama administration to veto the draft in a video distributed by his office. It was a sign of concern that Obama might abandon the United States' long-standing diplomatic protection for Israel at the UN and decided to abstain. The resolution would demand Israel immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Diplomats said Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had instructed Egypt's UN mission to postpone the vote. German investigators believe there is a high probability that the Tunisian suspect they were hunting in connection with Monday's attack on a Berlin Christmas market is the perpetrator. Germany's interior minister said he had new information that fingerprints were found in the driving cabin, and there is additional evidence that supports this. Chancellor Angela Merkel appeared alongside the minister at the Federal Office of Criminal Investigation, said she hoped the perpetrator would be arrested soon. Ringed by concrete barriers, the Berlin Christmas market targeted in the truck attack reopened with candles, flowers, and flags laid amid the small festive huts in tribute to the 12 people killed in the attack. Dozens of visitors walked alongside the aisles, stopping at a makeshift memorial to pay their respects. Workers had ringed the market with large concrete barriers to prevent any repetition of Monday's attack, where a truck plowed into evening crowds. The number of deaths claimed by methylite spirit in a Russian-Serbian city has reached 72. Dozens of people remained in hospitals after drinking bath oil, according to local health officials. Russian President Vladimir Putin demanded restrictions on the sale of surrogate alcohol and asked ministers to draft tighter rules for the production and sale of drinks, perfumes, and other liquids. Up to 12 million, mostly poor Russians, are estimated to use cheap surrogate spirits, many produced in illegal facilities. Investigators said bootleggers had been selling the product for a long time without any instances of poisoning, but that the fatal batch was contaminated by methanol, a toxic chemical found in cleaning materials and paint strippers. And finally, it will continue to be cold tonight in most regions and relatively cold in the Jordan Valley and Dead Sea, with light and dusty winds. Tomorrow, it will be relatively cold across the kingdom during the day, but unstable weather will affect the country in the evening hours, bringing with it a chance for rain in the south and eastern regions. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect mild conditions with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. 33 security officers who were injured in raids against terrorists in Karak are discharged from hospital. The last stage of evacuating rebels and civilians from Syrian city of Aleppo is underway. And the United Nations Security Council postpones a vote on a draft resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlements. Come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.